So our next speaker is Dr. Priya Buddhadev. She has done her MBBS from BJMC Pune. She has done MD DNB anesthesiology from GMC Aurangabad. She has done her fellowship in chronic pain management from our institute, Ashirwad Institute of Pain Management and Research. She has also done FIAPM. She is a consultant pain specialist at Sancheti Hospital, Pune. She is a director of pain services at Asian Ortho Spine Clinic, Pune. She has a publication that is a novel multimodal treatment for management of pain in rheumatoid arthritis, a case series. Madam will be talking on facetogenic pain. So I request Priya Madam to start her talk.
So thank you for the introduction. Lumbar facetogenic pain is the most common cause of back pain. Just a minute. I'm not able to. Yeah. It is one of the common cause of back pain. Finding the cause of the back pain is as good as dog chasing his own tail, because most of the factors causing the back pain are interrelated. Like facet joint could be the pain generator, it could be SI joint, it could be the disc, it could be the muscle and ligaments, or it could be the nerves. So in most of the cases, these causes are interrelated. More than two causes may be there in these back pain patients. So about facet joint epidemiology, facet joint pain accounts for 15 to 45% of the total back pain cases. Why there is so much of variation in prevalence or in different papers? The causes may be two. It could be the diagnostic modality which is used for the used for knowing what exactly is causing the back pain, as in whether the single block technique is used to diagnose the back pain, or whether there is a placebo block is being used, or double block is being used for diagnosing the back pain, or it could be the false positive results after the medial branch blocks. I'll be discussing this in detail later. So another thing is, it is a variable prevalence is seen in patients where age difference is there. Like age less than 45 years, the incidence is 36%. Age between 45 to 64 years, the prevalence is 67%, and it is 89% in age more than 65 years. It is more common in females more than males. The prevalence is higher in patients who have high body mass index. It is more common in lower lumbar facets like L4-5 and L5-S1. We have been knowing this facet as a cause of back pain since, say, more than 100 years. In 1911, Goldwith knew that facet joints could be the significant source of back pain and instability. Again, this was confirmed by Putti. But after that, for say 20 years or so, this facet as a cause of back pain was being neglected. Whereafter, Gormley again coined the term facet syndrome, and our attention was shifted back to facet pain. But again, with Mixter and Barr's article, they suggested that disc is the main cause of back pain rather than the facet. In 1940, Bagley suggested that up to 80% of the cases of low back pain and sciatica are due to referred pain from lumbar zygoprophyseal joint pathology rather than direct nerve root compression. Thereafter, in 70s, Rees he promoted percutaneous facetal rhizolysis, but it had his technique had hemorrhagic complications, so it was being modified by Shiley, and we have been using this technique of radiofrequency ablation of medial branch blocks till now with few modifications. So even though we have been knowing this facet as the cause of back pain since more than 100 years, almost every aspect of facetal pain, from diagnosis to treatment, is a controversy. This paper suggests that tells that even the standard treatment modalities which we have been using conventionally, that intra-articular steroid injections, radiofrequency denervations, but the evidence supporting both of these are conflicting. Even the pain physicians, among the pain physicians, this facetal pain is misunderstood, misdiagnosed, and improperly treated. Regarding in short the anatomy, I'll not go in much detail because I think we have already covered the anatomy part. So these facetal joints are true synovial joints. True synovial joints by means is it has two bony surfaces, that is the superior articular process of the lower vertebra, inferior articular process of the upper vertebra. It is covered with hyaline, the bony surfaces are covered with hyaline cartilage and furthermore covered with synovial membrane and fibrous capsule. Here the fibrous capsule is thick posteriorly, superiorly and inferiorly, but anteriorly it is deficient. Anteriorly, this fibrous capsule is being supported by ligamentum flavum. Posteriorly, it is being supported by multifidus muscle. So multifidus muscle is in close proximity with the facetal pain, with the facet joint. These joints can accommodate fluid up to 1 to 1.5 ml. It has clinical implications because when we are doing intra-articular facetal blocks, if we give more than 1 to 1.5 ml of drug, the drug can slip into the epidural space. For diagnostic block, it can give false positive results. If we are doing it for therapeutic purpose, we can have complications like unintended epidural injection. Normally, these facets do not bear any weight, but with disc pathology like disc degeneration, there can be shifting of load on the facet along with the disc. So this is in short the sonoanatomy which I was talking about multifidus muscle. I have hold the probe in longitudinal direction, parasagittally, longitudinally. Here we can see superior articular process, inferior articular process, and facet joint is in between. And just covering the facet joint is the multifidus muscle, and overlying that is the erector spinae. Here I have hold the probe in coronal plane, where my probe lies exactly on the spinous process. Here we can see the lamina. Here is the facet joint. Overlying that is multifidus, and above that is erector spinae. So just to show the close proximity of multifidus, I have added this slide. You can see the multifidus getting attached from the transverse process, from the spinous process to the transverse process, crossing 1 or 2 vertebral levels. There have been change in concept about facetal arthropathy in recent years. Like in Orthopedics Journal, they have suggested that it seems more accurate to consider facet joint osteoarthritis as a failure of whole joint structure, including paraspinal musculature, rather than simply the failure of facet joint cartilage. They did MRI study, and in MRI, it was found that multifidus undergoes atrophy in long-standing facetal degenerative diseases. And that forms a basis of doing dry needling in the facetogenic pains. Regarding nerve supply, the nerve root after exiting from neural foramen gives rise to the dorsal branch. This dorsal branch further gives rise to medial branch, the intermediate branch, and the lateral branch. This medial branch, after leaving from the neural foramen, it crosses the transverse process of the vertebra below. From there, it just penetrates the interspinous ligament. Thereafter, it goes below the mammulo-accessory ligament and supplies the facet joint. So there is a clinical implication of this mammulo-accessory ligament, because calcification of mammulo-accessory ligament can give rise to entrapment of the medial branch, and that can give rise to the further dysesthetic pain or the facetogenic pain. So this medial branch, apart from supplying the facet joint, it also supplies multifidus muscle, interspinous ligament, and muscle and periosteum of the neural arch. So the clinical implication of this is when we are blocking the medial branch, or when we are doing the RF of medial branch bilaterally or at multiple levels, we can give rise to atrophy of multifidus. And this multifidus is the main spine stabilizer. If it undergoes atrophy. This leads to instability of the spine, and we are doing more damage to the patient rather than giving him the benefit. So the solution for this is using ultrasound along with radiology for doing radiofrequency ablation. So if we are getting multifidus contraction, we have to reposition our needles, our needle, so that way we can prevent the multifidus atrophy. Intermediate branch, it supplies the longissimus, and lateral branch supplies the iliocostalis, skin and SI joint. So all the three branches are crowded near the superomedial aspect of the transverse process. So when we are doing the diagnostic block, it is better not to give the drug near the superomedial aspect of the transverse process. We just go below the transverse, below at the level of transverse process. I'll show in the radiology picture about the exact needle point. This slide is just to show that facetogenic pain, that facetal degeneration can give rise to radicular pain also. So this is the transverse cross section. Here we can see the disc where annulus fibrosus, nucleus pulposus. Posterior elements are pedicle, the transverse process, the facet, lamina, and the spinous process. So there is a central canal which can get compromised by the disc. There is the lateral recess. It can get compromised because of the facetal hypertrophy or from the from the lateral disc protrusion, and there could be neural foraminal compromise because of the facet hypertrophy or far lateral disc. So this facet hypertrophy can give rise to radicular symptoms also. And in those cases, doing radiofrequency ablation may not work to relieve the pain. So this is in short the radiological anatomy. Facets are best seen in the oblique view. Here we can see in oblique view the Scotty dog appearance, the eye being formed by the pedicle, the ear being formed by the superior articular process, nose being formed by the transverse process, front leg forming the inferior articular process, and the body being formed by the lamina. So this lumbar facet syndrome is clinically being seen as pain and tenderness in the lower back. There could be local tenderness or stiffness. There could be pain and stiffness or difficulty with certain movements. Now, what all movements can have pain in facetogenic issues is one is standing from sitting position or going downhills. Going downhill leads to hyperextension of the back, and that leads to facetal loading and pain. Again, pain on hyperextension. This clinically we see with single column loading test. There could be referred pain. So this referred pain, most of the time it is overlapping. Say for example, groin pain could be caused by all the lumbar facet issues, but it is more common with lower lumbar facets. The upper lumbar facet cause flank pain, or it can cause the gluteal pain and the lateral thigh pain. The lower lumbar facet give rise to lower back pain, and it can give rise to posterior thigh pain or even the pain below knee, and rarely the pain goes till the foot. Now about investigations, there are battery of investigations: X-rays, MRIs, CT scan, SPECT scan. But even if we see degenerative changes in the facet in these investigations, not necessarily the facet is painful in those patients. So if we consider sensitivity, CT scan is more sensitive than MRI for diagnosing the facetal pain, but it is not recommended always. And in SPECT scan, we can see acute facetal injuries, like there could be bone marrow edema after trauma to facet joints. So these are the level of degeneration which are based on MRI. It's almost same as any other joint, like grade 0 is normal facet joints, grade 1 is joint space narrowing with osteophyte formation. There could be grade 2, like narrowing of the joint space with sclerosis, and grade 3 is narrowing with subarticular bony erosion or subchondral cysts. Now, if the investigations are not very conclusive of the diagnosis, we may have to consider the diagnostic blocks. Diagnostic blocks could be in the form of intra-articular injections, or it could be medial branch blocks. So these diagnostic blocks have high false positive rates, which could range from 5% to 85%. And that is because I said that about the diagnostic methodology, whether single block technique was used, or whether placebo block was used, or whether it was 2 injections, whether it was comparative study with comparative blocks between lignocaine and bupivacaine. And there could be false positive, high false positive rates following a medial branch block because of the crowding of the nerves near the transverse process. Because if we are blocking the medial branch, other branches may get blocked, and we may be blocking the other pain generating structures like erector spinae, the skin, or SI joint also. So, to reduce the false positive rate of these blocks, there are certain things which we can keep in mind, like perform the placebo controlled block. If it is not possible, we can give comparative local anesthetic blocks. We have to aim for lower target point on the transverse process so that we are not blocking the intermediate and lateral branches. We have to reduce the injected volume to 0.5 ml so that drug does not spread to other nerves. And we have to be very judicious with the use of superficial anesthesia. And other thing which we can do is consider single needle approach. If, say, for example, we have to block 3 levels, we can enter from single needle approach, so that superficial anesthesia which we are using, that will be minimal volume, and we are not blocking the deeper structures. And other thing is we have to avoid the use of sedation and intravenous opioids. Opioids we can understand, but there have been few studies which say that even midazolam use has been associated with increased false positive rate following diagnostic blocks. About treatment options, conservative treatment, medications usually work very well for acute cases, but for chronic cases, that just gives temporary relief or no relief at all. Heat and cold therapy, supporting the lumbar curve, avoiding activities that aggravate the pain, staying active, low impact activities like brisk walk for 45 minutes or so, that helps in offloading the spine. Supportive braces, not advisable for chronic cases because it will further lead to muscle atrophy due to disuse atrophy, muscle disuse atrophy. And physical therapy, we have to have very good physiotherapists for treating such patients, because recently I have had 3 patients who had back pain. All the tests of acetogenic pain were positive. MRI was absolutely normal. Patients were young, working in IT. Because of this lockdown, they were working from home, so proper ergonomics was not being followed. And those patients, all three of them were given extension based exercises, so their pain was more it was aggravated with the exercises. So diagnosis of diagnosis of back pain is more important on the physiotherapy aspect also, and we have to guide the physiotherapist accordingly. Interventional pain management techniques like facet joint injections, medial branch blocks, radio frequency ablation, most importantly, ultrasound guided dry needling. And in few cases, we may need surgical treatment, like in cross-sectional anatomy, I have explained. If there is a hypertrophy of the facet joint and that is impinging on the nerve, in those cases, we may need, patient may need to undergo surgery. So this is just the radiological picture. Oblique view, we have given intra-articular steroid injection. You can see the nice drug spread. Then medial branch block. Here, the needle entry point is at the superior articular process and transverse process groove. But ideally, for diagnostic block, it has to be little lower, so that we are not blocking the other nerves like intermediate branch and lateral branch. These are the needle position for radio frequency ablation. The same needle position, bullseye appearance. Needle is at the junction of superior articular process and transverse process in oblique view. In AP view, it does not cross the pedicle line. And in lateral view, it is not crossing the anterior end of superior articular process. Otherwise, we would end up in the neural canal. So complications of radiofrequency ablation. It can cause temporary localized pain. There could be neuritic pain like dysesthesia, hypoesthesia, or exacerbated pain. There could be displacement of electrode leading to disaster. Patient can have paralysis, or there could be incontinence depending on the nerve which you have ablated. And there could be multifidus atrophy, which leads to spine instability, especially in cases after bilateral multi-level radiofrequency ablation. And this is the late effect of radiofrequency ablation. We may not see it immediately, but in long run, we have done the damage. This is the beautiful case report published by Dr. Lakshmi Vas, wherein the patient underwent radiofrequency ablation for facetogenic pain, and she landed up with camptocormia. And there was iliopsoas spasm, and that was released with dry needling, and further patient could stand straight, and the issue was resolved. So here is a patient wherein he underwent spine surgery 5 years back. 3 years after the surgery, he landed up with back pain and posterior thigh pain. There were no radicular pain symptoms. He received radiofrequency ablation by spine surgeon without diagnostic block. Unfortunately, his pain did not resolve. He had more pain after the procedure. So the option which had remained with me was only and only dry needling. So it was offered, and he accepted the treatment. So I have put paraspinal needles here. You can see the needles in all the 3 groups of erector spinae muscles. Here the innermost, medial most is spinalis and multifidus. The middle one is longissimus. The outer most is iliocostalis, and here quadratus femoris and iliopsoas needles are being put. The sizes for iliopsoas and quadratus needles are longer, and here the sizes are around 40 to 50 mm needles. So this patient also had triggers in hamstrings, and I could record the ultrasound picture of the local twitch response in the hamstring. I'll play it again. You can see, so it's a very bad video actually. You can see the needle coming here. Here the local twitch response. So in conclusion, the pain originating from lumbar zygapophyseal joint has long been recognized as potential source of low back pain. There are no discrete historic and physical findings that are pathognomic for lumbar facet arthropathy. Diagnostic blocks do provide short and long-term relief and help in subsequent neurolytic procedures such as radiofrequency denervation. In carefully selected patients who fail conservative treatment, intra-articular steroid and radiofrequency denervation are the treatment option. And ultrasound-guided dry needling serves as a sole treatment modality or a combination therapy for facetogenic pain. Thank you.
See, one of the very important findings that, things that she spoke about was facets don't bear weight. The nature gave us erect posture, but at the same time, it also broke the rod of the spine into the individual vertebrae so that we can bend, twist, turn, do all kinds of movements. And because this is broken, and to allow free movements, it gave an intervertebral disc with a liquid in the center, and which is enclosed in a fibrous annulus fibrosis so that the fluid does not escape. See the intricacy of nature in all these things. And that is from the notochord. The pulposus is from the notochord, which can give rise to problems later. This is probably, I do not know what of nature, but it is there. and the facets don't bear the weight, but they are synovial joints. They are highly sensitive. So they provide fantastic information, proprioceptive as well as kinesthetic information about how much you're bending, how you're bending. How do you get to know? It is because of all these facet joints, information that is coming into you, that you know where your back is really. Because if you compare the sensitivity of the synovial membrane of the facet to the non-innervated disc and highly innervated muscles and the facets will be the ones to provide this information of how the body is back is oriented in space. Is this information is given by the facet, and that is the reason why there is so much innervation, and that also works against you when it comes to facetogenic pain. I have treated, in fact, 2-3 physiotherapists, and one of them I remember very well was Dr. Ingal Halikar's physiotherapist, a very senior lady, very knowledgeable lady who treats only back. So she is she had a L5 facet problem, L5S1 facet problem. And physiotherapists are very hardworking people, actually. They take a lot of weight, they lift patients' limbs and things like that. And so she, as age advanced, she had a facetogenic problem. And Dr. Ingal Halikar said, look, you have a few disc issues, but you're not a surgical case. So go and see Lakshmi for your pain. So when she came, I gave her the option. Considering your age, which was 65 plus, I can do a test dose and it will be positive. And then we did her a test dose and she was positive. And then she was a little hesitant about undergoing RF. So I told her, we'll do a few sessions of needling. If your pains go away, then we won't do RF for you. So because she's a physiotherapist and a knowledgeable physiotherapist, I gave her this option. And then we treated her only with dry needling. And that was the end of the story. Now this is about 6 years ago, I think. And in this 6 years, she might have come to me once or twice for a repeat needling. So all the problems in this lady, the facets were degenerated, involved, but they were not really the main cause of pain. Just dry needling and relaxation of the muscles optimized the facetal function to such an extent that it was no longer troublesome to her. So this is the intricate interaction between the facets and muscles. That is why facetogenic pain responds very well to dry needling. And some, of course, there are some patients where you have to do RF, there is no question. And the facetal injections themselves are not really considered to be indicated nowadays. But along with dry needling, if you give one facet injection of steroid, that proves to be the game changer in many of these patients, and they may not need RF. So these are a little few tricks of the trade in between. After this, Priya, you have anything to say? No? Okay. Anybody else, any questions? Okay. So thank you, Priya, and all the best to you. And then, okay, let me ask the question since the idea came into my head. Journal of Ultrasound Guided Dry Needling. All of you, whoever are there, faculty, who will be interested in holding the post of editor, assistant editor, editorial board, etc., please let me know. Are you ready to put in that work? And we'll make it into a video journal, look into the possibilities of making it a video journal, what to do, how to do, why to do, etc. Please let me know. Thank you very much.
We have a question from Rajesh Mahajan, sir. Yes, ma'am, there is one question.
On it.
Which muscles are treated or needled in a facet joint pain?
Priya, would you like to answer that? Which muscles? Please go ahead.
Basically, we have to needle erector spinae, We have to needle multifidus and the antagonistic muscle like iliopsoas and the quadratus lumborum
Open.
also. And along with that, hamstrings and vastus lateralis and intermedius for sure. And depending on the patient's pain, calf muscles also we have to needle.
What about gluteus medius? Is that important also?
Yes. Glutei are also important. Sorry, I missed out on that.
Medius and maximus? Both?
Both.
Okay, thanks.
Can I come in here? Yeah. See, gluteus medius and minimus, this is information from a patient. Once I had a patient who was a gynecologist, and this lady had a lot of pain in the lateral hip area over the gluteus medius muscle. That was her only complaint. Elderly lady, Parsi lady, and she had this problem. And she had received, I think she had gone to some 2-3 other pain specialists, and she had obviously a lot of changes in the MRI and discs here, there, everywhere. And they had done transforaminal epidural, root block, and all kinds of things they had done. And then when she came to me, I found that she did have many discs. So I did start with an epidural, but this pain of hers did not go. Epidural hardly made any changes for her. And then when I started the needling, when I did the needling around the T12, T11 area, she told me, "Doctor, this is exactly mimicking my pain. The erector spinae multifidus around the area of a T12, L1 area or even higher was mimicking her pain." That means the triggers in the multifidus at the T12, T11, T10, L1 area refer their pain to the gluteus medius and gluteus minimus. So this will be the pain, facetogenic pain from these areas, facetogenic problem which is reflected into the multifidus of these areas as a central trigger, which causes satellite triggers in the gluteus medius and minimus. So after this needling session, later I realized that this is a lady gynecologist who does lot of obstetric practice. They are used to, working at a height and then lifting the baby and all that. So, and she's a frail lady, thin, frail lady. Probably that was her problem. And again, Dr. Chena was her name. And after that, she has never had any problems. She came to me after 1.5 years after she had to undergo some IBS surgery. She was one of the IBS patients who told me her IBS became better. And so she had to have some surgery, colonic surgery for that. And then after that, she had come to me because she had some recurrence of pain after that. Subsequently, I have not seen her.